Are we good? Okay, I'm going to go ahead. The Escazu Agreement is the regional agreement on access to information, public participation, and justice in environmental matters in Latin America and the Caribbean. It came out of the Rio Plus 20 conference in 2012, which was on sustainable development. It was a continuation of the original Rio conference of 1992. The agreement was completed in April 2018 and entered into force on the 22nd of April 2021, once it had the requisite 11 signatures. So that's actually why I chose this date as the second anniversary of the signing of the agreement. And currently there are 24 signatories and 15 parties, including countries like St. Kitts and Nevis, and I can't remember the other one, sorry. It's special because it is the first legally binding instrument in the world to include provisions on environmental human rights defenders. And it's also the first environmental agreement adopted in the Latin American and Caribbean region. And I want to go more into the environmental human rights defenders because it's really what makes the agreement special. So the UN Special Rapporteur on the situation of human rights defenders defined these people as individuals and groups who in their personal and professional capacity and in a peaceful manner strive to protect and promote human rights related to the environment, including water, air, land, flora, and fauna. They are often local residents or indigenous people confronted with development issues that infringe on environmental conservation and human rights. And it's important to remember the indigenous people part because they are actually targeted because of their, many indigenous people have a spiritual and cultural connection to the environment that most cultures don't have. So they are going to be drawn towards protecting the environment. They often reside near ecologically important areas and play a crucial role in protecting the areas. The Latin American Caribbean region is actually one of the most biodiverse regions in the world. It has something like 60%. It's mostly 60%. Sorry, I can't remember. We'll move on. Environmental defenders are often criminalized and work at great personal risk. The Latin America region is actually the most dangerous region in the world. And I have this statistic here. In 2018, of the 167 environmental defenders killed, 84 of them were from this region. So it's extremely dangerous to work as an environmental defender. It begins with stigmatization and it goes to outright slander. Your name is on a hit list. It's really dramatic and really horrible. The most dangerous countries cited are Colombia, Brazil, Mexico, Guatemala, and Honduras, followed by Costa Rica and Chile, who were the flag bearers of the agreements. Escazu is actually a village in Costa Rica, but none of these countries have signed it. And a rhetoric that I'm seeing regarding their refusal to sign is that they think that the agreement infringes on their sovereignty, which is nonsense. Because if you actually look at the Aarhus agreements, there was no discussion of sovereignty. It's been very smooth in the last few decades that it's been signed. I have this graph here. This was taken from an OECD report on, it's titled The Economic Outlook of Latin America 2022. And you can see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 of the 10 countries shown here are from Latin America and the Caribbean. And I wanted to feature one group, Mujeres Amazonicas. I'm definitely pronouncing that wrong. They formed not just to protect the environment, but to provide unity for the existing human rights defenders. And in 2003, they took the Ecuadorian government to court for failing to protect one of their villages, and they won, which is great. I also wanted to feature one environmental defender in particular, Versa Caceres. There is supposed to be an accent over her name, over the first A, and I could not because I am lazy. She is a Lenca native from Honduras, the co-founder and coordinator of the Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations of Honduras. She won a prize for a grassroots campaign that successfully pressured the world's largest dam builder to pull out of a dam at a river that I'm not going to pronounce. And that dam was actually had a lot of international interest in it, and she was able to get them to not do it because it would pose such a risk to that river, which is very special to some of the tribes there. And the year after she won that prize, she was assassinated. And she told a journalist that she knew that her name was on a hit list from years before, and she was assassinated by the army of Honduras. Going on to the rest of the agreements, because it's not just about environmental defenders. One of the other parts of the agreement is called, it makes provisions for public participation, which is important because it contributes to better decisions, because decision makers have more complete information, because the public is able to give them inputs, provide local knowledge, different perspectives. As a result, you can build a more engaged citizenry, increase the legitimacy of decisions, and help ensure the policymakers have valuable local knowledge. The agreement specifically mentions that governments have to make mechanisms for the public to participate in decision-making processes, revisions, re-examinations, or updates of projects and activities, blah, 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 blah. It's very comprehensive, which is great. There's also access to information that's mentioned in the agreements, which helps the public to make public authorities accountable for their actions and allows the public debate to be better informed and more productive. Access to official information can also improve public confidence and trust if governments and public sector bodies are seen as being open. The right of access to information empowers citizens to obtain information held by public bodies. It encompasses a right to request and receive information, as well as an obligation for governments to publish information proactively. We have 14 participants here. I actually want to see in the chat if any of your countries have a Freedom of Information Act implemented, because my country, Trinidad and Tobago, does, which I suspect is why they don't want to sign this agreement. India has one. I'll move on. If you've ever used the Freedom of Information Act, it's once you mention the specific documents that you want, you can generally get a response back, and it really gives you a feeling of power to be able to access information that is yours by rights, because you are living in a democratic society. And that's what this agreement is aiming to do, is to provide that sense of power back to the people. There's also a mechanism, trying to remember the name, the Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative, which many Latin America countries have signed on to, as well as Trinidad and Tobago, because we have that oil and gas industry. And having that transparency in place, especially voluntary transparency, it's really important. It makes things a lot better. I don't know how to explain it much better than that. Seeing Tanzania also has one, and it's written into the constitution. That's great. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you very much. Any questions?